Star Wars is a saga that spans decades. That describes both the story told by these movies, TV shows, comics, and all other media you can imagine, and the amount of time that artists have been telling that story. What I mean is, there is a lot of Star Wars to see and to choose from. Whether you've never seen Star Wars or you have seen it and want to show it to someone else, you might not be sure where to start or what order to watch these movies in. And man, are there a lot of videos that tell you what order to watch these movies in. And a lot of them have spoilers. I really sympathize with people who haven't actually seen these movies and are trying to figure this out. Like you're trying to pick a viewing order and you wind up watching some video where they tell you that in between this movie and that movie you need to watch this 50-hour cartoon series. Like whether you end up loving Star Wars including all that extra stuff or not, I don't think that's a very good way to get into Star Wars. Today, I'm just going to talk bare bones main movies here. So for anyone who's never seen Star Wars or who has seen it but doesn't think about it every day and would like to introduce Star Wars to someone else, this one's for you. This first video is spoiler-free. I'm going to tell you what order other people watch these movies in, and I'll tell you what order I think you should watch them in. I'm especially interested in what order to show these movies to kids, particularly if they know virtually nothing about the story. But I think my order works for all ages. All my other videos on this topic will have spoilers, and the twists of Star Wars definitely add something to the viewing experience. So if you've never watched Star Wars, watch this spoiler-free video, then watch Star Wars in the order I suggest if you want, and then come back later and watch the rest of my videos to let me know if you agree with my order. Or tell a friend who has seen Star Wars to watch my videos and see if they agree with me so they can help you pick the best order. There's a lot of debate about what order to watch Star Wars in. For someone new to the franchise, that might seem odd. After all, most of the movies are numbered, right? There's an episode 1 and an episode 9. Why not just watch them in numerical order? Or why not just watch them in the order they came out? Well, a lot of fans do just that. But one of the best things about Star Wars is how the plot unfolds. Different viewing orders let a viewer understand the story in different ways and be surprised by different reveals. By the way, I'm going to keep things relatively simple here. Star Wars has 9 saga or numbered films, 2 anthology films, and hours and hours and hours of supplementary live-action and animated content. For this video, I'm just going to talk mainly about the first 6 Star Wars movies and briefly mention the anthology movies. I think most people would agree that most of the other content should definitely only be watched after you've seen those. Before we get into the order that I recommend, the 3 most commonly discussed viewing orders are release order, chronological order, and machete order. Release order is just watching the movies in the order that they came out. Episode 4, A New Hope, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. That's the way the world was introduced to these movies, and many would argue that it's the simplest way to introduce in-world concepts, characters, and plot developments. Chronological order means watching the movies in their numerical order and in the order that the events of the saga happen. So, Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3, 4, 5, 6. Also, maybe, between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, you watch Solo, then Rogue One, since that's where those fit into the timeline. Even though the numbers go in order, this doesn't really work well, at least on a first-time viewing. Episodes 1, 2, and 3, that is, the prequel trilogy, is the backstory for George Lucas's original trilogy. The prequel trilogy is sometimes described as the answer to the question asked by the original trilogy. It's hard to appreciate an answer to a question you don't even have yet. These movies do tell their own coherent story that technically stands on its own, but the original movies, especially Episode 4, A New Hope, is without a doubt the best entry point for the uninitiated. Every other Star Wars movie depends on the world building and emotional connections made by that movie, whether it takes place years after or years before it. Then there's machete order. You watch Episode 4, and then 5, jump back in time to watch Episodes 2 and 3, then finish with Episode 6. Note that this order omits Episode 1 entirely. I see this order as an attempt for Generation X, who were kids when the original trilogy came out and not kids when the prequels came out, to begrudgingly incorporate the backstory to Star Wars that was not at all what they had imagined during the 2 decades before the prequels came out. If you're an adult agreeing to watch Star Wars just to humor someone you love, this might be your best option. If you never saw Star Wars as a kid, you probably won't have the magic connection to it that someone who grows up with the movies often does. But I think an adult might still appreciate the storytelling that the saga pulls off, especially if you watch the movies in this order. I think they can definitely still bring out the kid in you, but your mind won't be blown by the prequels or the originals the same way you would if you had seen them as a kid. Now, are these the only 3 ways to watch these movies?
No. There is another.
Personally, I'm a late millennial. The prequels, when they came out in 1999 and the early aughts, were targeted at my age group exactly. I'm part of the first generation that could experience the entire saga created by George Lucas, that is, episodes 1 to 6, all at once as a kid. As I've grown up, it's easy to see that the original trilogy, particularly episodes 4 and 5, are the better films. That being said, I can say from personal experience that to a kid, all of the prequels can be every bit as thrilling and imagination-capturing as the original movies. And if you watch them as a kid, that feeling has a very good chance of returning whenever you re-watch them, even into adulthood. And I believe what will really help is if you show them in an order that blows their mind. If you're showing the movies to a kid, my recommendation is something I call start at 1, but watch 4 first. Okay, that's awful. I don't even call it that, but that's still the method I'd use. The order is watch episode 4, A New Hope. Let that sit. Maybe watch it more than once. Maybe watch it 100 times. It depends on the person. Then watch episode 1, The Phantom Menace, episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Rogue One, if you want, episode 4 again, episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, then finish with episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Sound confusing? Let me explain. Without spoilers. Somehow. I'm going to explain in all my videos after this one that this order reveals the right information at all the best times relative to the viewer's connection to the characters in their journey through the saga. For those who have never seen these movies, just trust that there are things that you are better off knowing at certain points in time and no sooner. There's always plenty of action in every one of these movies, but the first half of this viewing order is laying the emotional groundwork for the crescendo and climax of the second half. Why start with episode 4 only to come back and watch it again? Like I said before, there is no better entry point to this series, while episode 1 is, ironically, a very poor choice for the first Star Wars movie you ever see. I'll explain this in detail later, but for now, I'll just sum it up in 2 points. Number 1, episode 4 perfectly plops the viewer in the middle of a saga already in progress in a galaxy they know nothing about while giving them just enough exposition to be okay with it. From the moment this movie starts, you feel like you just got to the part of the story where it gets good. You don't really know exactly how this Star War got started, what a clone war is, or why a hairy monkey wolfman can fly a spaceship, and you definitely don't have to. Number 2, this was the first ever Star Wars movie. It wasn't marketed all that well by today's standards because science fiction was not a highly regarded movie genre by most viewers. So when people in the late 70s lined up around the block or went to go see it 5, 10, 20, or 50 times during its initial run in theaters for 3 years until the sequel came out, it was because audiences liked it. If any Star Wars movie stands a chance of captivating the audience you want to show it to, it's the one that on its own captivated audiences over and over for years. So as for watching episode 4 and letting it sit, it's not like you have to watch all these movies in one sitting. Kids are kids for many years. When I show these movies to my kids one day, I don't plan on showing them all in one weekend or anything. When you watch an entire series of something all at once, you don't really get to reflect on any part of it. When you're waiting for the next movie or episode of something to come out, you get to imagine what might happen next, and you get to anticipate being able to see it and enjoy it. That's part of the fun, especially for kids who have great imaginations. The Star Wars movies in both of these trilogies came out 3 years apart from one another. That built a lot of anticipation. I'm not suggesting you wait that long, but if you want your kid to like Star Wars, you might not want to force feed it to them all in one sitting. No pun intended. Or maybe pun intended. That's pretty good. It doesn't matter. So if I'm showing A New Hope to young kids who luckily usually don't know anything, I would probably be careful not to imply that there even is more than one Star Wars movie when I first show it to them. After all, Episode 4, while certainly leaving room for a sequel, is a nicely contained story. There's no cliffhanger. Let them watch that as many times as they like. That's what kids in the 70s did. And make it a big deal that you're watching it, especially for their first time. Watch it on as big a screen as you can, and with big sound. See if it's playing in a movie theater anywhere near you. Have popcorn with it. Just do something special to make it an event that they will remember. Then, when they love that movie, show them the rest, starting with Episode 1 in the order I mentioned earlier, one movie at a time. Maybe once every month or two. Let them get to the point where they are begging you to watch the next one. Build that anticipation, and don't give away the plot. Speaking of giving away the plot, if you want to know more about why I love this order so much and think it's the best way to amaze a new Star Wars viewer with character development and plot twists, keep watching my other videos in this playlist. In my next video, I'll expand on why the order I've told you about works so well, but I'm going to do it with spoilers. So for now, I'll just sign off and say, may the Force be with you. Now that's lame. There's so many Star Wars quotes. How about,
who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?